Do you want to put your headset on too? And we're going to go all out in terms of making it as uncomfortable and weird as possible. Welcome to the AZ Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Hamid Shojai. Arizona's tech ecosystem is rapidly growing with incredible companies that are shaping our future. Every week, I sit down and talk with some of the people who are making an impact in this critical sector of Arizona's economy. All right, let's go. And we're live. I'm here with City of Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego. Hi, Kate.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's a pleasure. I'm going to start with a little bit of background about you. So you've got a bachelor's in environmental studies from Harvard, master's in business administration from Wharton, mayor of the fifth largest city in the U.S., which is kind of crazy when I think about that. The fact that Phoenix is the fifth largest is crazy in itself. Being the mayor of the fifth largest city, incredible accomplishment, but you're also the youngest and only female mayor for one of the largest 10 cities in the U.S., based on my research. I don't know if that's
It was
accurate.
true when I am elected, and now that one other woman has joined the top 10.
Oh, awesome. Well, that's a good thing. And of course, you're a mom to a 4-year-old boy. So with that background, why did you want to be a politician?
So it was not something I grew up wanting to do. You probably could guess from the MBA in entrepreneurial management. It's not the traditional degree for going into politics. Lawyers are the most common background for big city mayors. But I did a lot of work volunteering with the city. At the time, I was working for the Salt River Project in strategic planning and also worked in the innovation group there. I served as chair of the city's Environmental Quality Commission and helped develop our solar energy program, our climate action plan. I also helped lead the 10-year plan for the city. And I got very excited about what the potential was in Phoenix. I feel like Phoenix is still writing its own story, and that the people who are in leadership today can help shape Phoenix to a higher degree than most other cities.
What makes you say that?
We are a relatively young city compared to our peers. We are still building out. We are radically changing neighborhoods, including our downtown, while obviously still preserving the amazing history we had. People are regularly moving here. In addition to being the fifth largest, we are also the fastest growing.
Yeah.
And so I feel like as first a volunteer and now as an elected official, I can really try to push the city in a direction that makes sense to me. I'm very interested in a more sustainable city. I'm interested in moving the economy towards advanced industries.
Okay. So sustainability, advanced industries, what else? Like what is your big vision for City of Phoenix?
Well, we're also, we're changing the way the landscape of downtown. We're building out our transportation system, including our light rail system. But I hope it will be a globally welcoming city where you can come to this community and achieve your dreams, whether it's a startup or getting involved in the nonprofit sector. I hope we'll be known as a very welcoming city where you don't have to have been born in Phoenix. I'm from Albuquerque.
Okay.
But that someone can come from another country, another community, and be welcomed.
Albuquerque is almost like another country, right?
In many ways, it is a very different community than Phoenix. A wonderful place to grow up, but very different feel from Phoenix. In Albuquerque, where you went to high school, people still ask when you are in your professional career, and it matters to people.
Right.
Whereas I think in Phoenix, it's just, what can you get done here? Do you deliver results?
So you're working in the business environment. Things are sort of like fast-paced in the business world. And you said you were working for SRP at the time that you started working with the City of Phoenix.
Yes.
With the 10-year plan and such. So did you ever dislike this pace of, working with politicians or the city, and were things moving slow? What made you make that transition from a fast-paced world where, businesses kind of do stuff and every day it's quickly moving forward. You don't need to build consensus necessarily, versus switching to politics, which does require consensus. Things are very slow. You have to sort of convince a bunch of different people on every little thing that you want to do. What made you think, oh, that's what I want what I want to transition to?
Well, I love how much you can help change a community and solve people's problems. And I love the diversity of what I get to work on. So I may start a day working on new destinations being served from Sky Harbor, and then work on our water system, and then go to cool pavements for our streets department, and then Head Start and helping kids have good educational systems. And what a dream to be able to work on so many important things at once. COVID hit during my first year as mayor,
Wow.
and that definitely requires a nimbleness and responsiveness. We had a big strategic plan about what we were going to do, and that changed dramatically. We really had to pivot once COVID became so dominant, and things came so quickly. You got new science, new information. The state would pass new laws, and all the time we would have to respond quickly. So I would say it feels significantly quicker than the business pace that I was in before.
Oh, okay. So, all right, we're going to actually talk about COVID because that changed things quite a bit. But I want to save that for later in the conversation. Do you ever feel like things? Well, let me ask you to contrast. How are things different in politics versus the business world? Since you've sort of worked in both environments and held positions, obviously prominent positions in both environments. So, what is your contrast of business versus politics?
It varies a lot. A political campaign is very much like a startup. You begin a campaign with basically nothing, and you have to hire, you have to get equipment, you have to do marketing. It's just instead of a product, you're selling a vision.
Right.
And unlike a startup, when you exit, you either lose or you get a new job. So it is maybe an even faster pace. But so many of the classes I took in business school for my entrepreneurial management degree turned out to be very relevant to a campaign where you're trying to scale quickly as possible. You want to go from one volunteer coordinator to 100 volunteers as soon as you can.
Yeah.
And so that was very exciting. In working in the utility business, there is a fair amount of need to build consensus.
Right. That's true. Actually,
And I think
utility has a lot of politics involved as
so
well.
it's a heavily regulated industry
Right.
as well. And where I was a broad governance structure, so it wasn't like a startup where there's two people who get to make all the decisions, and you get together and like we're doing it, and then you do it.
Okay, so let's go back and learn about Kate, the young Kate. Where'd you grow up? What influenced your life? I want to know sort of like some of the details of that, and then we're going to come back to politics and tech and what you're doing for Phoenix and all this stuff. Great. It's going to be a great discussion, but I want to first start with your personal life. Like, where did you grow up? You mentioned Albuquerque. Is that where you were born?
Yes, born and raised in Albuquerque.
Okay. So walk us through that. What were some of the highlights of your sort of the childhood of Kate Gallego?
So my very close with my family. My parents were involved in the community. I have early memories about like building the park in our neighborhood, which seems to translate to what I do now, where it's just people getting involved in their communities and trying to make it better. I did struggle with asthma as a child, and I think that probably pushed me towards being interested in my environmental degree that I got.
Okay.
Also, I loved open spaces, so I've always loved going out in the mountains and going for a hike. That's one of the reasons I wanted to be in Phoenix, which is a city with more acres of park than any other in the United States. And there's just something I've always found refreshing about getting out in the outdoors and enjoying it. So that is something I picked up in Albuquerque that very much translated to why I wanted to be in Phoenix. Albuquerque is a pretty diverse community, so there's census data that shows you're less likely to look like your neighbor than in most other cities. There are many American cities where everyone in the neighborhood has sort of the same background.
Right.
And Albuquerque is not one, which I think prepares you for a life in politics.
Oh, why so?
We, in my job, I have the wonderful opportunity to work with so many different diverse communities. So, it would be normal to have a meeting with the Somali community and then go to a Vietnamese moon festival. And I love that about the richness of Phoenix and the job that I have.
Yeah.
But certainly, you have to learn different cultural rules, and especially being a woman in elected office, like what to wear to a Muslim community event or others. You have to be aware and sensitive, and I have found I just have to ask the questions because there's different rules in different communities, and sometimes I mess up.
I think it's good it's human to mess. I think like politicians should wear the mess ups on their sleeve. I mean, if anything, it's a good thing. When you were growing up, did you, like in high school, were you running for class president or like student council or any of that stuff? Or did you not have like sort of that aspect of your life? Did that come much later?
So I overwhelmingly spent most of my time on sports. I played junior Olympic softball, and I
Really?
would travel around the country, and no one was like, your parents are short. You are not going to be a great athlete.
Oh, no.
But I spent
But
hours.
softball, you don't need to be tall for softball.
Well,
do you?
in high school, I pitched for my team, and I spent hours learning pitches. But long arms and incredible strength are very helpful, and I have neither. But I did get involved in student government, and I was student body vice president. My class president is now first lady of Albuquerque.
Oh,
So
wow.
Albuquerque sometimes feels like a very small town.
That's awesome. So do you stay in touch with a lot of those people you grew up with as well?
I do, especially people who went into the public service world. It is funny. I will talk to mayors all over the globe, and so often we have the same challenges, and which it's just nice to be able to compare notes and solutions.
So you graduate from high school, you go to Harvard, right off the bat, right?
Yes.
What was that experience like?
It was very different. The weather was very different. I didn't really have the right wardrobe for a Massachusetts winter.
Right.
And people haze the kids from warm communities. So they would tell me stories like, it'll get so windy, your eyes will tear up, and then they'll freeze open.
So you had to worry about stuff like that.
So definitely winter was something that I was tough. And it gets dark at 4:30. It's always gray. In Boston, it sort of will snow and then get slushy and gray. And that was harder. I missed the sun more than I realized.
Yeah.
But it was a very rich community in terms of just diversity and
You lived in
meeting
the
amazing
dorms
people.
and
Yes,
and
I
stuff,
lived
and-
in dorms the whole time. And
So you go there, you're 18-year-old Harvard student living in the dorms. Like for most of us, who haven't experienced the whole sort of like Harvard life, I'm sure that's very different than sort of like normal college, right? Like what's Harvard like from an academic standpoint? I've heard that stories where a lot of students who are sort of like the top of their class, they get a little bit of a culture shock because all of a sudden they're not necessarily the top of their class. They're sort of like average, right?
right.
Like,
It was so many kids who were like the captain of the sports team, student body president, and valedictorian, and then you're not all. So that was tough. There was a lot of real challenges. We had 4 people who died by suicide who lived in my dorm, and so
Oh, my
that was
gosh.
just navigating. That was very,
so
very
there's a lot of
difficult.
stress on these kids to sort of like perform, and they come from a background where they're sort of like the best at everything, and all of a sudden they're not, and that stress gets to them. Is that why there's such? Was that suicide rate out of ordinary, or is that typical?
That was out of ordinary. And there were a lot of tough events that happened while I was there. So 9/11 happened,
While you were going to school.
and there were a lot of people who were directly impacted, a lot of people who lived in New York,
Yeah.
who knew people or who lost parents, which was...
Some of the flights took off from Boston as well.
Right.
So
Yeah, so there was a parking garage walking distance from my dorm that was swarmed with FBI agents because some of the attackers parked there.
wow.
And so that was, like sort of the world events are happening at the parking garage near where you live was something else. My roommate at the time, her father worked in the part of the Pentagon where the plane hit, and I have just the strongest memories of her being unable to reach him and all the uncertainty and just being glued to the television and worried.
Well, that's interesting because like we just went through the 20th year anniversary of 9/11. So 9/11 had a huge impact on you growing up. Did it shape some of your sort of like mental image or psyche of like how you view the world? And I think that as a college student, you're not necessarily thinking about the outside world very much. And 9/11 was, probably one of the first times that, I was in my 20s as well. And it's one of the first times you start thinking, oh, wow, the things that we do in the United States does affect, the rest of the world in such a way that anger can create such huge hatred to where innocent, someone can be willing to kill innocent people like that. How did that impact your sort of view on, or shape your thoughts and views on the world?
So I got very interested in studying world religions and understanding other communities. I have a very vivid memory that I'd never heard of Al-Qaeda before that event and felt like there was this whole part of the world that I didn't, or this whole situation that I didn't understand at all and felt ignorant. But I also remember some of the heroic stories. And, I think a lot about like the firefighters who rushed in and the role of cities in recovering. And I think that was one of the reasons I find city government so inspiring. So many of the successes of 9/11 and the inspiring stories were people who work in local government who, when asked, stepped up in huge ways and continue to do so. And so that is part of the reason I'm so excited to be part of local government, because I feel like on the very worst days, I work with the people who show up and are part of the solution, and that is inspiring to me.
Yeah. One of the things that I, dearly miss about what happened post 9/11 was that, like, in the months following, there was this sense of unity in the United States. And, I think that there was much more love, if you will, than there is today in politics. Today, like, politics seems to be extremely divisive. I think the previous 4 years contributed, took that to the sort of like nth level. And in a way, it's very disheartening for a lot of people. I think that, they're so fed up with politics and politicians on both sides that it's become this sort of like, can't touch that feeling. What are your thoughts about where we are today in politics versus where we were even 20 years ago, for example?
I do think a lot about how differently we've responded to the crisis of COVID-19 than 9/11. On 9/11, it felt like our country was coming together and this shared interest in shared values, and it's been very different during COVID-19, where it feels like people have sort of picked a side and gone to their corners. I hope that we can find ways to sort of have more belief in collective action. To be in government, you have to believe that we vote for vision and implement it, and that working together, we are stronger. But I do find many occurrences in my daily life where people are working together across party lines and huge divisions. I chaired the Maricopa County Regional Transportation Plan, and that brought together elected officials from like Tempe with urban visions. We want walkability and micromobility, and some of our outlying communities where they wanted like freeways and very different visions of transportation. But we were all able to come together to have a regional plan, which will then go to the voters likely next year. And that felt good, where we're all, what do you need? How is your community changing? The idea is that the whole county rises and falls together. If we pass it, everyone benefits. And I wish that was more visible, because I don't think it was even covered by the newspaper at all.
Right.
But here it is, Republicans who are 40 years older than some of the progressive Democrats, and coming up and sharing a vision, and that is neat. It also had a bunch of money set aside for innovation and new technology. So any startups listening who might be able to help traffic move better or help people get the light rail with an even better app, there's going to be funding if this vision passes.
Really?
To support that.
Talk about that a little bit. So what do you mean by there will be funding for startups? Like, you guys are providing... Are you looking for bids for people who build the apps, or are you looking to sort of fund startups that might be able to do cool stuff, or all of the above? Or what are the sort of details on that?
So it goes to the ballot first, and it has to pass.
Okay.
But I think we're optimistic
that it will pass.
And we set aside money with the idea that mobility is changing so much and the technology is changing so much. So some of the money is set aside for things like I-17 really needs some significant improvements.
Right.
We'll continue to build the light rail system, some set projects, but that there was also some money for innovation.
Right.
We work together across governments to have a smart region in Maricopa County, and the idea is we're talking to companies that we're willing to test new technologies, we're willing to try things, we want to be on the cutting edge, and the fact that we have a regional collaboration is very unusual. So right now, some of the work and successes that led to this money being set aside was we've been adding a lot of analytics about how to move traffic, collecting more data, and we launched open data system that has a variety of different data sets, including like when the buses and rail is arriving or traffic and parking patterns. And there's been some innovation around that. So we're hoping with even more money set aside, we can take it to the next level.
Yeah.
So next time you complain about your commute, there's opportunity to do something.
Do something about it. That's fantastic. There does seem to be a lot more sort of collaboration and bipartisan collaboration, I should say, that happens on the city and local government side as opposed to sort of national. National seems to be so divided. They're just like, Republicans, we're just going to do our thing. Democrats, we're just going to do our thing, and everything is sort of like right down the middle in terms of the votes. But when it comes down to actually getting stuff done at the city and even state level, it does seem like there's a little bit more collaboration. But I want to go back to sort of like your personal life. You come into politics and you actually start running for mayor as someone who's going through a couple of major life events. I forget if you were pregnant or just had a baby. You're going through a divorce. Walk us through some of that and how, because I'm not done with your sort of personal life yet. I know you transitioned us pretty well to some of the politics. We'll come back to that, but walk us through how that sort of what that was like, because most people don't experience that. Period. Men can't experience that because they can't have babies, and what was that like?
For anyone who's deciding whether or not to make a jump, my advice to you is do not wait till your life is perfect, because at least in my experience, it never will be. So I began 2016 as the vice mayor of the city of Phoenix, married, and had just found out I was having a baby. And then 2016 was not a good year for me.
And just to be clear, vice mayor is not an elected position, right?
It's elected from within so it's like a city council member gets elected vice mayor.
Okay, gotcha.
But it's not elected by the public. The only citywide elected official in the city of Phoenix is mayor.
Okay.
But I really thought I had my act together and life was good at the beginning of 2016, and then just pieces sort of fell apart for me. My mother was diagnosed with late-stage cancer. My marriage fell apart, and it was a really tough time for me. Because I was married to a United States congressman, it probably got a little bit more publicity than I would have expected. So my debut in one of the national newspapers was for getting divorced, which is not, as a child, how you dream of being covered in the media. And I felt like being pregnant while getting divorced, people would just be like, she does not have her life together, her act together. So it was very difficult. And there was an open seat for the city of Phoenix mayor. And at the beginning, I was just like, this isn't doable. Like my personal life, I don't know where I'm going to be living. And so I went through a tough time where I really didn't want to leave the house too much, which is hard to be in politics and not leave the house because you have a whole lot of bosses out there and you need to see them and work with them to do your job effectively. So I had been interested in running for mayor, but decided it wasn't doable, and it really, really ate me up, that decision. So by the end of the year, I kept thinking about it and decided to make a go for it. But it was a tough decision at the time. There were no millennials leading large cities, which is my age bracket. And people do not all universally love millennials. So I didn't know how people would take that. I think I'm still the only millennial for a large city mayor. And then none of the 15 largest cities had a female mayor. And I didn't know how people would take to be divorced mom with baby. That doesn't really fit my conception of mayor, so I assumed other people might have the same reaction and was very worried about that. But ultimately, I decided I had a really strong vision for pushing this economy towards a more tech, forward-thinking, advanced manufacturing, sustainable economy. I had a cool vision for our transportation infrastructure, for growing the airport to be more global, and just for making this a city where more people had a chance to fulfill their dreams. And so after months and months of being eaten up and feeling like I couldn't run, I eventually decided to make the challenge, the jump. But in 2017, I had a baby, got divorced, moved, and filed to and decided to run for mayor. So that is a lot of personal change.
Yeah. No kidding.
At once.
When was your baby born?
The beginning of the year.
Michael. At beginning of the year.
And then I ended up running in October.
Okay. Did his arrival help solidify some things for you? I mean, like, were you thinking that like, I want to build a better future for Michael, or like? Did that play any part in your decision to decide to run?
It's really, being a parent has really changed my framework for decision making. I think much longer term, like what kind of city do I want to leave for my son? Whereas before, I think I was more like, how do we attract this company and what do we get done next year? And now I think about next generation. And so that has been very inspiring for me for wanting to help build a better city.
I bet. Okay, so what sort of like led to you deciding, yeah, I'm gonna do this, as opposed to, was there any sort of like single event, or it was eating you up for months? Why the easy decision seems like would have been, no, I'm not gonna expose myself to public scrutiny while I'm going through a divorce, having a baby, and running for something that seems not achievable for a millennial, as you said, to become a mayor, while a new parent and going through a divorce. So like, what triggered you to say, no, I'm gonna go through all that hell or whatever it is that you had to go through?
I think there were a couple things that were important to me in my decision making. There were some policy issues where it became clear like I would have a very different, particularly around public safety and transportation, where I would have a very different vision from anyone else who was running, and one that I thought would be very exciting for the city, which turned out to be the case.
Other people got excited about your vision.
Right.
Okay.
Another one was when I first got divorced and there was like media coverage, it was all anyone would talk to me about, and that was very hard. But then I got outside of my bubble a little bit and realized most people, you didn't even know it had happened. Like when you read about yourself in the newspaper, I think I got in a little bit of a frame of mind where I thought other people were following it as closely, and most people are focused on their daily lives and they didn't really care.
Right.
And in some ways, there were some people who were sort of rooting for me more, who had gone through tough personal challenges and were like, we want to help you. We want to make sure that this divorce is not what holds you back from being mayor. And people who had similar life experiences were like, we want to make it so this is not something that holds you back. I had a bunch of moms who felt like it would be a big deal for Phoenix to have a mom who wasn't married.
They became
in the mayor's
super
role.
fans.
Or just great partners, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think people underestimate the value of having a unique circumstance, because you essentially, with so many people in the world, there's other people who sort of relate to those unique circumstances, and they tend to be the biggest advocates a lot of times for those people, as opposed to the average Joe or Jane, if you will, probably doesn't have super fans because they don't have something that's super relatable to. But it doesn't take a lot of people to be huge advocates to where all of a sudden you have a sort of, I don't know, an army of people who are fighting for your cause. And I'm not saying that you have an army of people, but just I think the unique circumstances are what trigger that sort of phenomenon to happen, right? So I don't doubt that may have even contributed to your success as mayor. That's awesome, or being elected as mayor. So before we move on from your personal life, I want to touch on one more thing, which is you already mentioned you were married to Congressman Ruben Gallego. What was that whole thing like? And feel free to say, hey, I don't want to talk about that, or whatever you think is totally fine with me as far as that's concerned. But it's an interesting experience to have gone through, because you were married when he got elected as well, right? Or is that? So
he ran for office first. He first ran for the State House of Representatives.
Okay.
He won. Then I ran for city council and I won. And then 3 months into my city council term, he decided to run for U.S. Congress.
Okay.
So it was a turbulent financial time. Both of us ran full time, and so then that means you lose out on one income,
Okay.
which was crazy. And
Wait,
generally,
what does that mean? Why do you lose out on one income?
so if you're running full time, you don't get paid to run for office.
Right.
So like I left
You
my
have to
job
step
at
down
SRP.
and
You don't have to, but it was a decision. Well, in the case of SRP, it was a decision I made where it was just too hard to do both effectively. And when I commit to doing something, I want to do it well. In the case of my decision to run for mayor, law required me to step down. So
Okay.
it's called resign to run, and you have to step down from city council unless you're in your last year of your term to run for mayor,
Gotcha.
which was also a big gut check moment because I was divorced with a baby, and then here I'm giving up my income,
Right.
which is like really betting on yourself. And I did not have a backup career plan at the time.
I'm sure that a Wharton Harvard graduate doesn't have to worry about too much about a backup income, but continue.
I did think I would be employable somewhere, but when like the first line on your resume is failed mayoral candidate, I don't know how people react from that, particularly if I was going to use the MBA in a more traditional environment where people aren't used to people being in politics.
Yeah.
But
Going
Ruben
back
and
to-
I are
yeah.
doing well together, and we're co-parenting. He does have a book coming out in November, and I haven't gotten an advance copy, so I'm a little bit nervous about what will be in his book when it comes out. But I mean, mostly it has been positive, and having shared interests in policy and how things work together has been good. But when it's sort of like startup life, when it's like good, it's really good, and when it's bad, it's really
everything
bad.
is going wrong at the
Right.
same time. Yeah.
So just, I think, sort of the intrigue and people in politics, and then obviously getting divorced while you're about to have a baby is very unusual.
Right.
And people made up fantastic stories about the circumstances, which were not as interesting as people wanted. But, ideally, if you're getting divorced, you don't want it to be in the newspaper, right?
Right. All right. So we'll move off the personal life stuff. I'll leave you alone for a little bit on that, and I want to shift the discussion to technology. I was surprised to learn that Scottsdale has actually more tech software companies than Phoenix, and considering the smaller population of Scottsdale versus Phoenix, I thought that was an interesting little tidbit. So. I think you already know that information. First of all, it's not a surprise to you, right? Or is that a surprise that Scottsdale has more software companies than Phoenix does?
We have a much more diverse
Ah,
setup of
okay.
startups and small businesses.
Do you feel a little bit of competition between the cities in Arizona, or do you feel like no, we should all collaborate together and sort
We do try to work together. So we have a group called the Greater Phoenix Economic Council where we do economic development together as a region. So like I had a buddy from undergrad who was looking to locate in Maricopa County, and I went out to Scottsdale and helped be part of that because they decided the Scottsdale Galleria was the most
nice.
attractive place to be.
Right.
But I felt like I was part of the business attraction. So in that case, they were a Bay Area company, and Scottsdale was their second location, and helped tell the story of it and work together.
It does benefit the entire Greater Phoenix community for any company to sort of like either start in any of the cities because they're hiring from wherever, right? Like the hiring aspect of it is not limited to Scottsdale or to Phoenix or whatever. So, going back to sort of what you're working on to help attract tech companies, and both on the startup side and bringing tech companies to Phoenix. What are some of the interesting active campaigns that you're doing?
We have worked to try to create cool spaces for companies. That ranges from the city was part of bringing Galvanize to Phoenix, which has been a really great place for some of our tech startups. We've been financial supporters of a med tech space. We are a real leader in medical devices.
Okay.
And that requires, in many cases, more specific space because it requires laboratory technology.
Right.
We've done that in partnership with multiple educational institutions. If you come to our downtown, we just opened a building in partnership with Wexford, where they have a bunch of lab spaces and are looking for innovative bioscience companies. That was a deal.
Startups or just to bring existing ones to Phoenix?
So so far it's been a lot of space for companies that have spun out of our universities and have looked for a place to grow. I'd been working with Wexford for years before they came to Phoenix and went and saw one of their facilities that they had in Maryland. And it felt like such a great match for us because they're a partner who understands that the overall community matters. You can't just plunk a building down, but it matters. Are there great housing environments? Are there great arts? They love that they're near the Roosevelt Arts District and also so many of our downtown sporting venues. And so they knew, innovative people care about the environment in which they are working. And that's where I think the city can be really part of it. Is it a great community? Are there the people who will help challenge you and push you, but also the right partners if your business goes in a different direction and you need a different set of expertise? Like, is this the right vibrant community where you can make that happen?
Are there already interesting companies that are springing up as a result of the MedTech or the centers that have been created?
Yes, and there's been some great, we've been real leaders in precision medicine, which is exciting.
Precision medicine being creating drugs that are tailored to specific people or specific diseases,
yes.
or both?
A drugs tailored to specific people at the DNA level.
Okay.
So the City of Phoenix was a partner in bringing TGen to our downtown, which is the Translational Genomics Institute, and they are led by someone who was a real leader in sequencing DNA. They have been putting that expertise in finding cures that are more specific to your individual tumor.
Right.
And can often find treatment courses that are more effective and have fewer side effects, which I think is what everyone is looking for. I lost my mom last month to cancer, and that's been very much on my mind, being the solution. I really hope that we beat cancer, and I'm working to make sure the path to do it goes right through Phoenix.
Sorry to hear that, by the way.
Thank you.
So, what is your thoughts in terms of I know you've been instrumental to also bringing some of the tech to Phoenix. So, for example, the Taiwan Semiconductor company that is investing something like $12 billion or some ridiculous. The numbers are huge. What are your thoughts in terms of how that helps the community? Like, obviously, the investment brings jobs with it, but is there a strategic aspect to what you're trying to do with bringing companies like that to this area?
We are hoping to be more globally connected, and having this great relationship with Taiwan is incredibly important. We want to have more of these advanced manufacturing jobs. They're sort of seen as some businesses that divide up an existing pie. So the number of grocery stores is often very directly related to the number of people who live in a community, and it just moves wealth around. But when you're exporting globally, so TSMC makes chips that go in the iPhone, and really
all kinds
that
of
brings in resources from around the globe, and then when you sell the product, it goes around the globe. So it really grows the amount of resources and wealth in an area. They're very high-wage jobs. They tend to have a different economic pattern than some of the real estate and hospitality jobs that we have in this community.
Right.
So it helps us if there's a recession in one area when we are more diverse. My big belief is there's going to be semiconductors in an increasing number of things. And
of course, yeah. That's a good bet, I think.
Yes, I think it's a very, very safe bet.
Yeah.
Like when I was starting out, I didn't get out my iPhone to turn on a vacuum cleaner, and that is now
right.
My toaster's probably going to be talking to my phone in a few years. So I hope the more expertise we have in that area will help us both with the bigger businesses, but also startups. If you have those engineers with the advanced expertise, if you have people who understand the manufacturing process, that can lead to founding more great companies. So we've looked at some of the ecosystems in the Silicon Valley area, and you see how you get a lot of innovation around these leading companies.
What is your view or the city's view on technologies like cryptocurrency and Bitcoin? Is that something that you guys have looked at all, or What are your thoughts?
So we do have an ability if you want to pay your water bill with cryptocurrency. We've looked at it in that area.
Really?
Generally,
you can pay your water bill with
we had
crypto?
I had an opportunity to become the first mayor to pay my bill in cryptocurrency, and we decided that was not something I needed to spend time on.
Does that mean that City of Phoenix has looked into sort of crypto and decided to embrace it, or what does that mean in terms of like practical terms?
We look at it on both sides as well because we do have some law enforcement issues and some concerns in that area, but we also, if there's going to be global financial markets, want to understand and participate in. So it's a real balance because we do have the law enforcement side as well.
Okay, gotcha. So you guys are looking at it more pragmatically that, hey, if this is going to be something that is going to be part of the future, then we need to understand it. But at the same time, if it's being used for illicit activity, then we need to sort of like figure that out as well. Is that a good summary of how you guys are looking at it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to switch back to politics, which, and where we are in politics, which is one of the things that I already mentioned that I hate about politics is how divisive it has become. I generally avoid politics as much as I can. And I'm kind of curious what your view on the current divisive nature of politics is. Why are you positive about it? And I understand on the local level, it's very easy or easier for people with differing views and backgrounds and parties to work together much better at the city and state level. But when you look at the national, are there things that worry you as well? That, holy cow, like how did we get here to where there's zero trust of the other side? What are your thoughts on that?
It's been interesting to me going into this profession, how much people have wanted to put me in a box and say, you have this one ideology and you agree with everything.
Right.
And I think people are complex and their political voting and their views are based on your life experiences. And so you may have very diverse opinions, and I think that is healthy and we should embrace it. The events of January 6th were deeply worrying to me.
Yeah.
A real and some of the response to it. But I mean, to me, that was an attack on our democracy, and we all have to condemn that. So that was one of the hardest moments.
Doesn't it feel a little crazy that not everyone sees that aspect of it as like an attack on democracy? Because it did seem like there was that one event should be something that like everyone agrees on, right? I mean, does there seem to be a disconnect as to why doesn't everyone agree on that being completely out of bounds and out of line?
To me, it does seem that when you have elected officials saying, well, there were tourists there and or trying to make excuses or saying, it was people with a very different agenda than what they had. That has been...
That's the part that's kind of scary for a lot of people is that, there was very few people across the party line. There was some, like Senator Ben Sasse, and, there were even our governor stepped up and said, no, this is not right. But there was a surprising number of elected officials, and as a result, a huge portion of the population who thought that was totally within the norms and bounds of normalcy. And that event was shocking that there wasn't a little bit more unity around. But that kind of speaks to like everything else that's happening, like COVID and science and, so... but also there's like aspects of, freedom and individual decision-making rights and things that, does seem like there's becoming more and more division created as a result of like where we were, and it just keeps getting worse as opposed to getting better, right? Like what makes you optimistic that it's going to get better?
I'm really watching at the DC level. There's an infrastructure bill moving that was done on a bipartisan basis in the Senate. Our Arizona delegation very involved with that, and it does important investments, including bringing broadband to more people. It would help us improve the airport, a lot of different areas where I feel like America has been a leader but needs to invest to, in some cases, regain that leadership role. And if that can move forward successfully, I think it will be a very big moment for some healing and bringing together, and also maybe restoring some faith in bipartisan action. But it's not clear what will be next with that bill, so that'll be one of the things I'm watching. Most of my inspiration, though, does come at the local level. Most of the things we do at the City of Phoenix, we do in a bipartisan basis. And
Right.
so I'm hopeful people will notice that and realize it is still possible, and that most people are rooting for that to happen.
Speaking of local politics, what are some of the things that Governor Doug Ducey has done, for example, that you have been a big fan of, right? Like just, obviously Governor Ducey is from the Republican Party. You're on the Democratic side. What are some of the compliments you can give him?
So one of the things that we were able to work together very well on was the TSMC deal.
Okay.
Bringing the Taiwanese semiconductor to Phoenix was a whole of government
Right.
approach. So the Arizona Commerce Authority, which is a part of the state, was very involved. We sent a City of Phoenix delegation, which I was part of, to Taiwan, and then they had a delegation shortly after, and I think it was meaningful to the company that we were all sending the same message. And it wasn't just at the state and local level. Our school boards are stepping up, and community college, which has elected officials, is producing people who will work there. The local school district in the area around TSMC, which is in North Phoenix, is now developing Mandarin programs and really also trying to look at the semiconductor industry. And so it's been neat. So many people with so many different ideologies have been part of making that a success. So that has been something that has been really good to work on.
Awesome. So I want to wrap up our interview with just the things that excite you about Phoenix, Arizona, just in general, even at the national scale if you want. But here's some examples of things that I would love for you to sort of get into is that here's a couple things on the government side that we're doing that's exciting. Here's a couple people who I think are doing amazing things and that you should watch. And here's a couple companies that are doing, whatever aspects of those you want to pick and choose, feel free. And then I'll, we might expand on that, but at the very least, let's start there and then go.
Perfect.
See where it goes.
So Phoenix, we're trying to be great partners for our startups and small businesses, and I just wanted to highlight some of the things that we're doing.
Yeah.
We have now a small business toolkit, and you can go and check it out at phoenix.gov/small business toolbox.
Okay.
It has concierge business services to help you navigate government. It has research tools, so if you're trying to figure out information about your competitors, what are their costs, how much are they paying? That's a big deal for people in the startup world right now because the talent competition is so strong. So there is some market research tools that are available to you there. In partnership with Jenny Poon and an extension of Cahoots, we have a social media platform to connect entrepreneurs as well, and we are really trying to strengthen the community.
Yeah, I love Jenny. Is that the hub?
Yes.
HUUB. What's the URL? Is that like if you go to the Phoenix, what was it? Phoenix.gov?
/small business toolbox.
And that is the same thing as the project, the Hub project that she's been working on?
So Hub is one part of what we have in our toolbox.
Gotcha.
And Hub is not just available in Phoenix. I think they are working with 2 other cities as well. But
okay.
It is something that you have for our...
So that's pretty exciting for people starting businesses or even potentially looking at how to expand or if there's competitive research capabilities there. That's awesome. What else?
And we are really trying to work with our different startups to make sure we have great spaces. Many of our Great Phoenix startups are in an area called the Warehouse District, which is just south of our downtown. We have a bunch of warehouses along the rail tracks that used to be where we would load produce and cotton and things we grew, and that was a backbone of our economic hub when we were an agricultural community. And now it's sprouted as home of many of our entrepreneurial communities. One you know well is WebPT is located there. Yeah. And so I have had a great time working with WebPT as they have grown and needed new spaces. And warehouses are great for a startup because if you're growing exponentially, you can bring people in. If you have product, there's opportunity. Well, you can just totally reconfigure in a way that maybe if you were in an office tower, sometimes walls get in the way. We like to think we can get rid of walls and help you out.
Are we missing something?
We're at 50 minutes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're wrapping up. So,
so I guess just to conclude, as a mayor with an MBA in entrepreneurial management, I never got to do the direct entrepreneurial thing, but I love living vicariously through our startups. We want to be a partner if there's things you think the city can do to help your business grow. Sometimes we can connect you to customers. Sometimes, if you just need help getting in a door, we can help with that. And so we hope that'll be exciting and make life a little bit easier when you're going through that entrepreneurial climb.
For sure. As a startup person and former entrepreneur, hope to be an entrepreneur again. I'm super excited about everything that you're saying and everything that you're doing in the city of Phoenix. I'm a fan, but obviously I live in Scottsdale, so I have to be a little bit of a cheerleader.
Regionalism.
Yeah, exactly.
Scottsdale has a great mayor as well.
But anyway, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Thank you for making the time, and I think that your political future is extremely bright, and I'm going to be a cheerleader from the sides. So, thank you.
Well, thank you for your support, and let me tell you a little bit about myself and what's going on in Phoenix.
Awesome. I appreciate it. All right, you made it to the end of the episode. I would love to get your feedback, so take a moment to leave a genuine review in your favorite podcast app. That also helps us reach more people. Speaking of reach, if you like a particular episode, be sure to share it with someone who you think would enjoy it. See you next time.